Donald Trump faced a number of massive protests during his time in the UK recently, but the fight over Donald Trump wasn't limited to the streets. Joining us now is Ash Sarkar, senior editor at Novara Media, who you might have seen in a video that went viral in her time on Piers Morgan's program. Welcome to the show, Ash.
Hey, how are you?
Good to have you here. So you had a fun interaction with Piers Morgan. In case the people watching didn't see the video, what happened with him?
So I got up at 5 a.m. to go on a morning breakfast show called Good Morning Britain to talk about the Stop Trump protests. And Piers, I mean, he's clearly got a lot of energy, was feeling particularly belligerent, and decided to really try and nail me to the wall, not about my politics regarding Donald Trump, but about Obama, who isn't actually president at the moment. So having pressed me on Obama a bit and the specifics of his premiership, he then decided to go on and call, refer to Obama as your hero, Obama, and so on and so forth. And I hope you'll forgive me for having lost my temper a bit. And I said, like, Obama's not my hero. I'm a communist, you idiot. And then proceeded to share with the viewers my views about Piers Morgan's alleged journalism regarding Donald Trump, because he's conducted 2 interviews with Donald Trump. The rest of the British press hasn't really been able to get near him, apart from The Sun more recently. And they really have been just absolute panegyrics to him. Softball questions, praising his use of Twitter, asking him to come and manage his favorite football team, whereas issues like climate change, issues like Palestine, the growth of the far right in the United States, those things don't get a look in. So I think it's pretty embarrassing if you think of Piers Morgan as representative of British journalism. So I thought I'd let him know that.
Well, don't worry, I don't think of him as representative of any journalism whatsoever. Yeah, look, here's the problem. I mean, we know that Donald Trump does not sit down with anyone who will be critical of him. The last time he sat down with an actual journalist, he said that he fired Comey over this Russia thing, and he does not want to have a repeat of that sort of problem. But with Piers Morgan in general, this is gonna sound stupid. What is his problem? Like, in general, I don't know how he's still on TV, but in particular with the way that he criticized you, this is seeming to become more and more common that any criticism of Donald Trump is assumed to be hypocritical in regard to either Obama or some other president. They always make it about somebody else. So what is going on with that?
I mean, I think that what Piers is doing is drawing on a rich tradition on the part of establishment journalists who, what they try and do is make any sort of dissent impossible, because ultimately they're invested in preserving the status quo so that they can preserve their access to those in power and feel important and get, some pretty sizable paychecks at the end of it. That's what this is about. So in some ways it's nothing new. The new element is that I think that Piers Morgan and other outlets in the UK, particularly from the Murdoch-owned press, thinking in particular about The Sun, they are making a deliberate tack to the alt-right. And I think that in the next few months, particularly as Brexit negotiations continue to drag their carcass across the floor of British politics, we will see an increase in American money flooding into British politics and political media to try and nurture an alt-right culture of the likes that you've seen in the US. And I think that Piers is giving it a bit of this and detecting where the wind's blowing and trying to set up his show as a cradle for the culture wars, and then bringing someone like me on it who's a woman, who's Muslim, who's a communist. I'm the perfect tap dancing poodle for that aim. And the thing that you then have to do is make judgments about what you do to break through that. So I don't think that is simply an innocent sin, like incompetence or stupidity, though I think those 2 things are definitely at play. I think that is part of a calculated move to insult the viewing public, treat them as dumb, treat them as people who can only be shouted at, and provide them with some hate figures to draw the focus of their ire so they don't look at what's really going on at the higher echelons of power.
Well, I apologize in advance for American money ruining your politics and media in the same way it's ruined ours.
I mean, don't worry, Brits are pretty good at ruining their own politics too.
Okay, oh good, I feel better, thank you. So let's talk about the Stop Trump protests. I really wanted to be there, unfortunately I wasn't able to. And I am thrilled anytime I see people outside of the US standing in solidarity with those of us who absolutely despise Donald Trump. But in particular in the UK, what was driving these protests?
So in the UK, we have seen a lot of terrain being won over by the forces of, what Stephen Andon called xeno-racism. So it's not just racism in terms of black and white, but it's this real fear of, immigration itself, the crossing of borders. We've seen that play out in our politics in various ways, from what drove the Brexit vote to the growth of some far-right street movements around a particularly nasty guy called Tommy Robinson, the increase in racial hate crimes on our streets. And we've also seen things like the Windrush scandal, where our Home Office was deporting British citizens to Jamaica and other places where they'd often never been in their whole lives, simply because they were black and working class. So standing against Trump wasn't just about the figure of Trump and the policies that he's enacting, but was an opportunity to show the kind of coalition of values of resistance to policies that were, Trump-esque that we've seen at home. So it was definitely about standing in solidarity with those affected by the Muslim ban, demonstrating to the international community that we find the separation of children from their parents utterly unconscionable. But it was also about saying, hey, let's not get complacent. These dynamics exist here as well. And if we get lazy for just 1 second and we take progressive values for granted, we could well see policies enacted that we find terrifying. The way that we've seen in not just America, but Italy, Hungary, Poland. The Britain at the moment is kind of an outlier, and that's something worth protecting and defending.
Yeah, I can certainly say that falling asleep at the wheel for a couple of months during an election can be terrible. I lived through that not too long ago. But I do want to talk about the alternative, or at least what we have as an alternative in the US. So you're a UK-based communist. So I want you to look at America. So he assumed that you loved Obama. We've established that you did not worship Obama as your Lord and Savior. But the Democratic Party and the new progressive challenges to attempt to remake the Democratic Party, as a UK-based communist, what do you think about those?
I mean, I might be a communist, but I support Jeremy Corbyn, who is, a bit of a fuzzy socialist granddad. And so I'm perfectly happy to align myself with electoral projects which aren't necessarily quite at the abolition of private property. And looking at the US, I look at figures like Ocasio-Cortez, and she is tremendously exciting. She's charismatic. She's got actual politics. She's not afraid of challenging people, or at least that's what it seems to me. And she's doing it by tying in some anti-racist politics that lots of people would advise her to jettison, and tying it to a progressive economic platform which might do well in the Midwest and the Rust Belt, and not just in metropolitan diverse centers. And I think that is something that's tremendously exciting. Looking at the energy that was behind Bernie Sanders' campaign for the Democratic nomination, I think that he's got a lot to build on. The big question is whether democratic infrastructures and vested interests will allow for these kinds of figures to become successful and potentially lead their party to victory come the next presidential election. I think that's really up in the air. What we've seen in the UK is that those kind of those forces in the Labour Party, which are pretty aligned to neoliberalism, won't let go of the levers of power particularly easily. Even though Jeremy Corbyn is leader, he faces tremendous problems from within his own party because they are not willing to let a genuine socialist alternative contest an election without being held back in some way. So I think that there are some similar problems, but there's a lot to be excited about.
I agree. We've been doing like nightly primary coverage here at TYT, and some of the interference in some of these primaries has been disheartening, but it is great to see candidates like AOC winning in different parts of the country.
I mean, you just feel frustrated. You're just like, do you want democracy or nah, mate? Like, come on.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Ash, for joining us, and in particular for not backing down in the face of someone like Piers Morgan. We need more people in media like you.
Thank you so much. It's really kind.
Thank you so much for watching that video. Before you move on to the next, I just wanted to let you know I have a documentary series out. It's called True North, available on Go90, and now you can help get it nominated for a Streamy as a documentary series. The link is down below. Thank you so much.